Everyone at the back entrance of the Mercer Grand Hotel saw a poor man standing in the rain, but only one woman looked at him like he still mattered. The November storm had turned downtown Chicago into a blur of headlights, wet pavement, and rushing umbrellas. At the service door behind the hotel, Alexander Mercer stood beneath a narrow awning in a torn gray coat, his hair damp, his boots scuffed, his hands tucked deep into his pockets like a man who had nowhere else to go. To anyone passing by, he looked invisible. To the security guard blocking the door, he looked like a problem. "You can't stay here," the guard said, waving him away. "Guests can see this entrance from the side windows." Alex lowered his eyes, hiding the sharp focus behind them. The guard had no idea he was speaking to the owner of the entire building, the CEO of Mercer Global, the man whose name was engraved in gold across the front lobby. Alex had come here for a reason. After years of watching people smile at his money and lie to his face, he wanted to know what kindness looked like when there was nothing to gain. So tonight, he became Nathan, a broke stranger in the rain. Employees slipped past him without slowing down. A valet muttered under his breath. A sous chef carrying trash bags turned his shoulder, pretending not to see. Alex felt the cold soak through the sleeves of his coat, but he did not move. Then the service door opened again, and Grace Holloway stepped out with a canvas tote bag on one shoulder and exhaustion in her blue eyes. Her uniform smelled faintly of laundry soap and steam. She had just finished a 10-hour night shift folding white towels for rooms she could never afford. The guard pointed at Alex. "Don't encourage him." Grace looked from the guard to the shivering man, then down at the paper soup container in her hand, the dinner she had saved for the walk home. For one quiet second, Alex expected her to protect herself like everyone else. Instead, she stepped under the awning, held out the soup, and said softly, "Here. It's chicken noodle. Still warm." Alex stared at her. "You don't know me." Grace gave a tired little smile and pulled off her thin plastic rain. "Poncho. No. But I know what it feels like when people decide you're not worth seeing." She draped the poncho over his shoulders before he could refuse. Around her neck, a small brass key swung on a chain, catching the yellow service light for half a second. Alex noticed it. He noticed the way her fingers closed around it, as if it were the last piece of a life she was trying not to lose. "What's your name?" he asked. "Grace," she said. "And you?" He hesitated just long enough to feel the first sting of guilt. "Nathan." She nodded like the lie was a simple truth, then pointed toward the alley exit. "There's a 24-hour church shelter 4 blocks west. Tell Mrs. Alvarez I sent you. She'll find you a dry blanket." The guard scoffed, but Grace did not look back. She stepped into the rain with no poncho, clutching her tote bag to her chest, walking toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. Alex watched her go, the warm soup heavy in his hands, and for the first time in years, the test did not feel like something he was giving someone else. It felt like something he had already failed. Grace did not look back until the hotel disappeared behind a curtain of rain and traffic. By the time she reached the bus stop on Wabash Avenue, her blouse clung cold against her arms, and the wind slipped through her uniform like it had a key. She told herself the soup did not matter. The poncho did not matter. She had gone without dinner before. She had walked home wet before. What mattered was the envelope inside her tote bag, folded between a pair of clean socks and a library book she was already 2 days late returning. Inside that envelope was $400 in cash, almost everything she had saved from 2 weeks of overtime. At midnight, she would slide it through the mail slot of a legal aid office with Rosewood written in blue ink across the front. No one at Mercer Grand knew about Rosewood. No one knew why Grace counted every dollar twice, why she never joined coworkers for drinks, why she kept a brass key around her neck and touched it whenever someone mentioned home. Home was a dangerous word. For most people, it meant a porch light, a full refrigerator, a voice calling from another room. For Grace, it meant a brick building on the south side with green shutters, a cracked front step, and women laughing in the kitchen while her mother made coffee strong enough to wake the whole block. Rosewood House had been a shelter once, but to Grace, it was a promise. Then 5 years ago, papers arrived. Signatures, notices, men in tailored coats using soft voices and hard deadlines. Mercer Global took the building, and Grace's mother spent her final years believing she had failed the women she had sworn to protect. Grace never forgot that. She also never said it out loud. The bus hissed to the curb, and she climbed aboard, dropping exact change into the fare box with fingers stiff from cold. Her apartment sat above a closed bakery in Pilsen, one narrow room with a space heater that clicked like it was arguing with itself. She changed into dry sweatpants, hung her uniform over a chair, and opened a shoebox beneath the bed. Inside were old photographs, legal letters, newspaper clippings, and a yellowed picture of Rosewood House on opening day. Her mother stood on the front steps, smiling beside a 12-year-old Grace, both of them holding the same brass key. Grace pressed the key against her palm until the edge left a mark. "I am close, Mom," she whispered. "I just need one more file." Across the city, inside the penthouse suite of the Mercer Grand, Alex stood under a hot shower that could have washed away the rain, but not the look in Grace Holloway's eyes. An assistant had already laid out a charcoal suit, polished shoes, and a stack of morning reports. He should have been reviewing revenue numbers. Instead, he stared at the plastic poncho drying over the back of a chair and the empty soup container on the marble counter. Nathan was supposed to be a mask, a simple test, but Grace had treated that mask with more dignity than most people gave the man beneath it. And Alex, who thought he understood secrets, had not yet realized hers was big enough to shake the foundation of everything he owned. The next morning, Grace returned to the Mercer Grand before sunrise, when the hotel still looked half asleep and the lobby smelled of lemon polish, fresh coffee, and expensive flowers. She entered through the service hallway, tied her hair back, and stepped into the laundry room where industrial dryers rumbled like distant thunder. White sheets rolled in warm waves behind glass doors. Towels moved from carts to folding tables. Uniforms hung in perfect rows. Everything in that room belonged to someone else, and Grace had learned to make beauty out of things she was never allowed to keep. She worked fast, quiet, careful. Every folded towel had a clean edge. Every pillowcase was smooth. Her supervisor, Mrs. Delaney, passed by with a clipboard and barely looked up. "Holloway, you are on sweet linens today? Top floor. Do not touch anything that is not marked for laundry." Grace nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The top floor made her stomach tighten. Executives stayed there. Board members. People who spoke about buildings like they were numbers, not memories. She pushed a card into the service elevator, and as the doors closed, her fingers went to the brass key beneath her collar. Rosewood. Just one more file. She had learned from a former clerk that an old acquisition folder might still be stored in the Mercer Grand Archive office, 2 doors away from the executive conference suite. All she needed was a document proving Rosewood House had never been properly released for sale. One missing signature. One wrong date. One truth strong enough to reopen the case. The elevator chimed. Grace stepped out into a quiet hallway lined with soft carpet and framed black and white photographs of the city skyline. She moved like she belonged there, because fear always looked louder than confidence. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Inside, a man in a charcoal suit stood near the window, speaking into a phone with his back turned. Grace froze. Something about his posture felt familiar, the stillness, the controlled patience, the way he listened before he spoke. Then he turned slightly, and her breath caught. For half a second, she saw Nathan beneath the clean shave, the perfect collar, the polished shoes. But that was impossible. Nathan had been shivering under a service awning last night. This man belonged to the sky above Chicago. Grace lowered her eyes before he could notice her staring and pushed the cart past the doorway. Alex stopped talking mid-sentence. Through the glass reflection, he saw her profile, the same tired blue eyes, the same careful hands, the same brass key resting against her throat. His assistant on the phone asked, "Mr. Mercer, are you still there?" Alex did not answer right away. Grace Holloway was here. Not at the service door. Not in the rain. Here, on the executive floor, moving past the archive office like a woman carrying a secret through enemy territory. He ended the call and stepped into the hall, keeping enough distance that she would not see him clearly. Grace paused near the archive door and pretended to adjust the towels on her cart. Her hand hovered near the handle, then pulled back when footsteps sounded from the conference room. She continued walking, but Alex had already seen enough. The girl who gave away her dinner did not just work in his hotel. She was searching for something inside it. And for the first time since he began pretending to be poor, Alex wondered whether he was the only one wearing a disguise. That evening, Alex returned to the service entrance in the same torn gray coat, with the same scuffed boots, and a new uneasiness sitting beneath his ribs. The city was colder than the night before, but the rain had stopped, leaving Chicago shining under streetlights like polished steel. He waited beside the brick wall near the loading dock, where delivery trucks came and went, and no one looked twice at a man pretending to have nothing. At 9:15, Grace stepped out carrying 2 trash bags from the laundry room. Her shoulders tired, but her chin lifted. She saw him and stopped. "Nathan." Alex gave a small, careful smile. "I was hoping you worked tonight. You came back. I wanted to return this." He held out the folded plastic poncho, wiped clean and dry. Grace looked at it like she had not expected anything to come back to her. Most people would have kept it. Most people would not have given it away. The words landed softly between them. For a moment, the alley noise faded, leaving only the low hum of traffic and the distant sound of jazz from a bar around the corner. Grace took the poncho, then noticed his hands were bare. She frowned, reached into her tote bag, and pulled out a pair of brown knit gloves with a small hole near one thumb. "Here." Alex stared at them. "Grace, I cannot take your gloves. They were my father's." He would have said the same thing, then taken them anyway because his fingers were freezing. She pressed them into his hands before he could answer. Alex felt something tighten in his chest. Not because the gloves were valuable, because they were not, because she gave them like they were. "Why are you kind to strangers?" he asked. Grace leaned against the wall, looking out toward the alley mouth where headlights swept past. "Because strangers were kind to my mother once. Before everything went wrong." Her fingers moved to the brass key on her necklace. Alex noticed again. That key must open something important. Grace's face changed, just a little, like a curtain moving in a closed room. "It used to." She tried to smile. "Now it mostly reminds me not to quit." He wanted to ask more, but the door opened behind them, and Mrs. Delaney stepped out with her clipboard. Her eyes went straight to Grace, standing beside a man in a worn coat. "Holloway, is there a reason you are socializing on company time?" Grace straightened. "No, ma'am. I was just taking out trash." "Then take it out. And do not bring your personal problems to this hotel." Alex felt the old CEO in him rise, sharp and ready, but Nathan could not command anyone. Nathan could only stand there and watch Grace swallow the insult without letting it bend her. When Mrs. Delaney went back inside, Grace picked up the bags again. Alex stepped forward. "Let me help." She hesitated, then handed him one. Together they walked to the dumpster at the end of the alley, 2 people under a cold Chicago sky, both hiding names, both carrying histories heavier than the trash in their hands. Grace looked at him once and said, "You know, Nathan, you do not have to prove you are okay all the time." Alex almost laughed, because that was exactly what he had spent his whole life doing. Instead, he pulled her father's gloves over his hands and said, "Maybe I forgot how not to." Grace nodded like she understood too well, and in that quiet moment, Alex realized the test had changed. He no longer wanted to know whether Grace could love a poor man. He wanted to know whether she could ever forgive the rich one he truly was. By Friday night, the Mercer Grand was dressed for people who never entered through the back door. Crystal lights glowed over the lobby, black cars lined the curb, and guests in tailored coats moved across marble floors as if the whole city had been polished just for them. Grace was not supposed to be seen in the lobby during the donor reception. Laundry staff belonged downstairs, behind swinging doors and steam pipes, where the rich could enjoy clean sheets without thinking about the hands that folded them. But a last-minute spill in the ballroom sent her upstairs with fresh linen napkins stacked against her chest. She kept her eyes low, moving quickly past the flower arrangements, until a woman in a silver dress stepped backward without looking and knocked a full glass of red wine across her own sleeve. The woman gasped, then turned on Grace as if Grace had thrown it. "You ruined this," she snapped, loud enough for heads to turn. Grace froze. "Ma'am, I am sorry it spilled. I can bring club soda and a towel." "You people are always sorry after you make a mess." A few guests looked away. A few smiled uncomfortably. Mrs. Delaney appeared at once, her clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. "Grace, apologize properly." Grace's face warmed, but her voice stayed even. "I did not touch her glass. Do not argue with a guest." Across the lobby, Alex stood near a column in Nathan's worn coat, hidden from the reception crowd by a line of tall palms. He had come to watch how the hotel treated invisible people when money was in the room. Now he watched Grace stand alone beneath a chandelier worth more than her yearly rent. Every instinct in him wanted to step forward, end it, fire Mrs. Delaney on the spot, and make the silver-dressed woman regret every word. But Nathan had no power here. Nathan was only a poor man near the wall, and the test felt cruel now because Grace was the one paying for it. Grace slowly set the napkins on a side table. She looked at Mrs. Delaney, then at the woman in silver. "I can clean the stain," she said softly, "but I will not confess to something I did not do just because my paycheck is smaller than her bracelet." The lobby went still. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. The woman blinked, offended. Mrs. Delaney's mouth tightened. "That is enough." Grace nodded once. "I agree." She picked up the napkins she had not dropped, turned, and walked toward the service hall with her shoulders straight. Alex followed several steps behind, his heart pounding in a way no boardroom had ever caused. Near the back corridor, Grace stopped by the water fountain and pressed one hand against the brass key at her throat. Her eyes shone, but she refused to let a tear fall. Alex approached carefully. "You were brave." She gave a small, tired laugh. "No, brave would be not needing this job. You still told the truth. The truth costs more when you are poor." The words hit him harder than accusation. Grace looked at his borrowed gloves on his hands and softened just enough to hurt him. "My mother used to say dignity is the one thing nobody can take unless you hand it over." Alex could barely breathe. Somewhere above them, the reception music floated through the walls, smooth and golden. Down here, under fluorescent light, Grace Holloway looked more powerful than anyone in that ballroom. And Alex knew, with a certainty that scared him, that he had not fallen for her kindness alone. He had fallen for the part of her that stayed unbroken in a world built to bend people like her. The next morning, Alex did something he had not done in years. He went looking for the truth before asking his lawyers to explain it away. In his private office above Michigan Avenue, the city stretched beneath him in silver glass and winter light, but his attention stayed on one name glowing across his laptop screen: Grace Holloway. He told himself it was responsible due diligence. She worked in his hotel. She had been near the executive archive. She carried herself like someone searching for evidence. But beneath every practical excuse was the image of her under the lobby chandelier, refusing to trade dignity for safety. Alex opened the personnel file first. Grace Holloway, age 28, laundry attendant, night shift, no disciplinary record until the wine incident, emergency contact blank. Then he clicked the background notes attached by Human Resources. His breathing slowed. Holloway, Rosewood House, Southside Women's Residence. Acquired by a Mercer Global Development subsidiary 5 years earlier. Demolished plans delayed after community protest. Legal dispute marked inactive. Alex leaned back as if the words had pushed him. Rosewood, the brass key, the envelope, the look on Grace's face whenever someone said home. He opened the acquisition folder, and the deeper he read, the colder the room became. There were missing pages, odd transfers, a release form signed by a board member who had died 2 days before the printed date. His father's signature appeared on the final approval line, bold and certain, like a door closing. Alex closed his eyes. His father had built Mercer Global with charm in public and pressure behind closed doors. Alex had inherited the company, the skyline, the name, and apparently the shadows too. By noon, he was standing in the old archive room himself, sleeves rolled up, pulling dusty banker boxes from metal shelves while his legal director, Patricia Voss, watched with growing concern. "Alexander, this file is from before your tenure. There is no benefit in disturbing it unless someone forces our hand." Alex looked up. Someone already did. Patricia frowned. Who? He thought of Grace giving soup to a stranger, giving gloves that belonged to her father, giving truth when silence would have been easier. A woman who deserved better from us. Patricia's expression tightened. Is this about the laundry attendant? Alex did not answer, and that silence was answer enough. That evening, he returned as Nathan, not because the disguise still felt clever, but because he did not yet know how to face Grace as the man connected to the ruin of her home. He found her behind the hotel, sitting on an overturned milk crate during her break, eating crackers from a vending machine. Packet. When she saw him, she lifted one eyebrow. You keep showing up in expensive neighborhoods for a man with no money. Alex tried to smile, but guilt made it thin. Maybe I am drawn to good company. Grace shook her head, but she moved the cracker packet between them. Then sit down, Nathan. He sat beside her under the yellow service light. For a while, neither spoke. Then Grace touched the brass key and said, almost to herself, there used to be a house with green shutters. Women came there when they had nowhere safe to start over. My mother ran it. She said every person deserved a door that opened for them. Alex's throat tightened. What happened to it? Grace looked at the brick wall across from them, but her eyes were far away. A corporation happened. Papers we could not fight. Men we could not reach. My mother died believing she lost Rosewood because she was not strong enough. She turned to him then, and her voice lowered. But I think they took it illegally, and I am going to prove it. Alex sat very still, her father's gloves warm on his hands, the name Mercer burning behind his teeth. Grace had just handed him her biggest secret, and he had never felt poorer in his life. By the night of the annual Mercer Global Gala, Grace had stopped believing coincidence was innocent. The hotel glittered from sidewalk to ceiling, wrapped in white flowers, camera flashes, and the low music of people celebrating money as if it were morality. Grace stood in the service corridor wearing her black staff uniform, one hand closed around the brass key beneath her collar, the other gripping a folded schedule she had copied from Mrs. Delaney's desk. At 9:40, the executive archive would be empty for exactly 12 minutes while the board took photos in the ballroom. 12 minutes to find the final Rosewood file. 12 minutes to prove her mother had not failed anyone. She moved when the hallway cleared, heart beating so loudly she could almost hear it over the ballroom orchestra. The archive door opened with a soft click. Inside, rows of cabinets waited under pale light. Grace went straight to the third drawer, the one she had watched Patricia Voss unlock earlier. That afternoon, her fingers moved fast. Rosewood House. Acquisition. Community transfer. There. A thin folder with a red legal tab. She opened it and felt the air leave her lungs. The missing release form was there, and signed, stamped incomplete, buried behind a later version that carried a date no honest document should have carried. Grace lifted the page with trembling hands. This was it. This was the door. Then the lights snapped brighter behind her. Step away from the cabinet, Mrs. Delaney said from the doorway, her voice sharp with satisfaction. Patricia Voss stood beside her, pale but controlled. 2 hotel security officers waited behind them, not touching Grace, only blocking the exit. Grace clutched the folder to her chest. This belongs to Rosewood. Patricia's eyes narrowed. That belongs to Mercer Global. Within minutes, they brought her through a side entrance into the ballroom, not because they needed to, but because humiliation worked best with witnesses. Conversations died as Grace was led past tables dressed in white linen. Mrs. Delaney announced loudly that a laundry employee had been caught taking confidential files. Grace saw the silver-dressed woman from the lobby smile into her champagne glass. Then the master of ceremonies approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host and chief executive officer, Alexander Mercer. Applause rolled through the ballroom. Grace turned toward the stage, confused for only one heartbeat. Then she saw him. Not Nathan in a torn coat. Not the man who ate crackers beside her under the service light. A tall man in a black tuxedo stepped into the spotlight, clean, powerful, untouchable, and every face in the room rose toward him like he was the sun. Grace's fingers loosened around the folder. Her mouth went dry. Alex looked at her from the stage, and the pain in his eyes told her the truth before his name did. You, she whispered. The room kept clapping. Alex did not smile. He walked down from the stage instead of speaking, each step cutting through the applause until silence followed him. Grace stared at him as if the floor had disappeared. Nathan was never real. Alex stopped a few feet away. Grace, I can explain. She laughed once, small and wounded. You pretended to be poor to see if I was worth trusting, while your company stole the only home my mother ever built. The ballroom froze. Alex flinched, but he did not deny it. Grace lifted the rosewood folder for everyone to see. You wore a costume. I wore a uniform. But only one of us was pretending for fun. Patricia stepped forward quickly. Alexander, do not engage. We can handle this privately. Alex looked at the file, then at Grace's brass key shining against her throat, and something in him finally broke clean. No, he said, his voice carrying across the room. Nothing about Rosewood will be handled privately anymore. For 3 seconds, no one in the ballroom moved. The orchestra faded into an awkward silence. Camera flashes stopped. Grace stood beneath the chandelier with the rosewood folder pressed against her chest, waiting for Alex to choose the company the way men like him always did. Instead, he turned toward the microphone. "Bring me that file," he said. Patricia stepped closer, her voice low. "Alexander, this is not the place." Alex looked at her, and the softness disappeared from his face. "It became the place the moment one of our employees was dragged in here to be shamed." The words rippled through the room. Grace did not hand him the folder at first. Her fingers held the paper like it was the last breath of her mother's name. Alex did not reach for it. He waited. That small restraint hurt more than an apology. Finally, Grace passed it to him. He opened the folder on the podium in front of everyone, page by page, while board members shifted in their seats and donors stared over half-finished desserts. "Rosewood House," Alex said into the microphone, his voice steady but rough at the edges, "was acquired by a Mercer subsidiary 5 years ago. I was told it was a clean transaction. Tonight, I am looking at evidence that says otherwise." A board member stood. "This is irresponsible." Alex did not look away from the page. No, what was irresponsible was building profit over missing signatures and calling it progress. Patricia's face turned pale. "You are exposing privileged materials." "I am exposing a wrong." He lifted the unsigned release form. This document was incomplete. The version used to take Rosewood appears to have been altered after the fact. A low murmur broke through the ballroom. Grace felt the floor beneath her shoes again, but only barely. For years, people had told her to move on, to accept the loss, to stop chasing ghosts in paperwork. Now the ghost had a voice. Alex looked toward the board table. "Effective tonight, Mercer Global will suspend every executive connected to this acquisition pending independent review. The Rosewood property will be returned to a community trust led by Grace Holloway, if she chooses to accept it. Every resident displaced by the closure will be offered restitution and housing support through a new fund paid for by my personal shares, not company charity." The room erupted in whispers. Mrs. Delaney stared at the floor. The woman in silver no longer smiled. Grace's eyes burned, but she refused to cry in front of them. Alex stepped away from the microphone and faced her without hiding behind the stage, the name, or the tuxedo. "Grace," he said quietly, though the entire room could hear, "I lied to you. I thought I was testing the world for honesty, but I was too afraid to offer any of my own. What my company did to Rosewood was wrong. What I did to you was wrong. You do not owe me forgiveness because I finally told the truth." Grace looked at him, and for a moment she saw both men at once. Nathan under the rain with soup in his hands, and Alexander Mercer holding a scandal in front of his own empire. "You cannot buy back trust," she said. Alex nodded. "I know, and you cannot repair my mother's heartbreak with one speech. I know that too." Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "Then start by letting me walk out of here without anyone following me." Alex stepped aside immediately. The path opened. Grace walked through the silent ballroom alone, the brass key warm against her skin, the rosewood folder in her arms. Behind her, Alex stayed where he was, surrounded by power, applause gone, reputation cracking, and for the first time in his life, he did not try to save himself. 3 months later, Rosewood House opened its front door again on a clear Saturday morning, and Grace stood on the cracked front step with the brass key trembling in her hand. The green shutters had been repainted. The porch light worked. The kitchen windows were open, carrying out the smell of fresh coffee, lemon cleaner, and cinnamon rolls donated by the bakery downstairs from her old apartment. Women from the neighborhood gathered along the sidewalk, some holding flowers, some holding photographs, some simply standing there with hands over their hearts because a place they thought was gone had returned. Grace wore a navy dress from a thrift store and her mother's old cardigan, the one with pearl buttons and sleeves a little too long. For a moment, she was 12 again, watching her mother unlock the door and say, "A home is not a building, sweetheart. It is a promise people keep." Grace slid the brass key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Behind her, people clapped, but she heard only her own breath. Rosewood was not a memory anymore. It was open. Inside, the walls held framed photographs, a legal aid office, a small library, and a dining room table big enough for anyone who needed a seat. Mercer Global's name appeared nowhere except on one document in Grace's office, a signed restitution agreement, complete, public, and permanent. Alex had kept his distance exactly as she asked. No flowers with his name. No interviews. No dramatic speeches. For 3 months, he sent lawyers when paperwork was needed, contractors when repairs stalled, and checks from his personal account without a single note asking her to call. Then, just after the crowd thinned, Grace saw him across the street. No tuxedo. No torn coat. No disguise. He wore dark jeans, a wool coat, and the brown gloves she had given him, neatly mended at the thumb. He waited beside the curb until she looked at him. Then he crossed slowly, carrying a small envelope. "I almost did not come," he said. Grace studied him. "Why did you?" Alex handed her the envelope. Inside was a key, plain and silver, attached to a tag that read Rosewood Community Fund, Office 2. "Because the board approved. The independent fund this morning," he said. "You control it. I do not. But if you ever need someone to carry boxes, answer phones, or sit quietly in a meeting and listen, I would like to work for the trust one once helped hurt." Grace looked down at the silver key, then at the brass one resting against her chest. The old key had opened a memory. This new one opened a future. "You understand this does not fix everything," she said. "Yes. And I am not promising you anything." "I know." His voice was quiet. "I am not here to buy trust back, Grace. I am here to earn it slowly, if you will let me." A breeze moved through the doorway behind her, carrying laughter from the kitchen. Grace thought of the man in the rain, the lie that had hurt her, the truth that had cost him, and the choice he had kept making after everyone stopped watching. She stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Then start with the boxes in the hallway," she said. Alex smiled. Not like a CEO, not like a man trying to win, but like someone grateful for a beginning. He walked into Rosewood House carrying nothing but the gloves, the silver key, and a promise he would have to prove every day. And as Grace followed him inside, the brass key warmed against her heart, no longer a reminder of what had been stolen, but of what kindness, courage, and truth could finally bring home.